All right, welcome everyone. My name is Allison Portnow Lathrop, and I'm the head of public programs at the Ackland Art Museum. Thank you for joining us today for our artist conversation with Shanequa Gay. I'd like to go over a few technical aspects before we get started with our virtual program. First of all of our audience members have their audio and video off and will throughout the talk. But that being said, we welcome your interaction in the chat function where you can leave your thoughts for the panelists, or through the Q&A function, which is where you should leave your questions that you'd like answered at the end of our program. So today we have live closed captioning in English, and you can turn this on or off by pressing the CC transcript button at the bottom of your screen. And I'll give you a few seconds to find that. You may need to find the more with the 3 dots button to get to that, but I'll let you look for that, and you can feel free to send us a chat if we can help you troubleshoot. So I'd like to begin our program now by introducing our 2 panelists. Shanequa Gay, an Atlanta native, has exhibited at the Zuckerman Museum of Art in Kennesaw, Georgia, the Hammons House Museum in Atlanta, the Hayti Heritage Center right here in Durham. Well, I'm in Durham. The McCall Center for Art and Innovation in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the Chattanooga African American Museum in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Her new commission, Holding Space for Nobility, a memorial for Breonna Taylor, has just opened at the Ackland and is currently being presented digitally on our website, ackland.org. So I'm sure some of you have already checked that out. Leading our conversation today, we have Lauren Turner, the Ackland's assistant curator for the collection. Lauren helps oversee our permanent collection of over 19,000 works, in addition to working on our special exhibitions and contemporary site-specific installations in our art and gallery, where Holding Space for Nobility is currently installed. So at this point, I'd like to hand things over to Lauren to begin our conversation with Shanequa and remind everyone here to join in by sharing thoughts and questions in the chat and Q&A. So Lauren.
Thank you, Allison. We appreciate the introduction. And I want to really quickly, before I forget, send some thank yous to David Sperling and Will Hallman, who are serving as our live closed captioners, and point out that this installation and the related programming have been made possible by the generous support of James Keith Brown and Eric Diefenbach. So we especially thank them for their assistance in making this all happen. And I do want to thank really actually everyone who RSVP'd, because there was quite an assortment of questions that you submitted. And so I have tried my best to incorporate this into questions as we're into the questions I'll be asking Shanequa as we converse. But that doesn't mean that that's your only chance. As Allison mentioned, she will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So feel free to let us know if anything pops into your mind as we're talking that you'd like us to discuss a bit more. So thank you, of course, most of all goes to Shanequa for appearing with us today. I think this is her second Friday lunch in a row that she's committed to the Ackland, so I really appreciate it, Shanequa. Shanequa has currently been serving at Emory as part of an Arts and Social Justice Fellowship, and she will be spending next semester as a visiting artist at SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design. So she's been very busy, and I've been very impressed that she was able to tackle our art and commission amidst all of this. So thank you again, Shanequa. I'm not really sure when you sleep, but what you're doing is very impressive.
I can't. I'm actually up now.
I was gonna have Allison pull up a PowerPoint that we have to share with some installation shots of Shanequa's new commission. And Shanequa, I wondered if, as the artist, you sort of wanted to walk us through what we're seeing here.
Sure. So I compiled together, and I had a couple of images I wanted to share as well, and I guess I will as we go about. But what you're seeing here is an image of one of my devout figures. The devouts were some chimera, some the kind of intercessory deities that I developed over the course of maybe 3 or 4 years ago while I was in graduate school, actually. So, the job of graduate school is to undo you from everything, but I didn't want to undo myself from hybridity. And so I was able to kind of discover these beings over the course of my own research, and digging in spaces and reading books like When God Was a Woman, right, and just kind of remembering who we were. And so from that, I have inserted Breonna as the face, as this kind of face of one of the deities. And that's what you'll see as you pan around the room is Brianna's face peeking from these deified figures. My deities are a myriad of things, right? So they're amalgamation of sometimes deer, bull, raven, vulture. This was the first time I have well, no, it's not the first time because I'll say within my paintings, I've also used zebra, but use zebra, I feel like with intention, right? So I began to kind of research the meaning of zebras and how they were really, really community driven. A pack of creatures and how they really did everything together, and how scientists have discovered that the black and white is really to identify one another from a different group, right? And so with this language of identity, with this language of community, I wanted from a symbolic standpoint for these devouts to represent our nation as a community, just as a whole, and the art and space, a holding space of nobility, just representing, for me, royalty, wonder, and listening to how her family just spoke about the type of light that Breonna was, hearing people who knew her just speak about how she was just this dynamic woman. I wanted her dynamism to be able to take up space in this room. And I feel like she does. And below you'll see an altar of black tiara glass, which is hopefully housing salt water. I know I left that to Lauren's underpinning in the midst of creating the installation, but salt water representing cleansing, salt water representing tears, salt water representing kind of washing away what happened with Breonna. And it was our Ann space was just a great space to be able to put this work here, put my grief down, because I really I was able to kind of have a lifting off of me and being able to create this work, just to celebrate Breonna. And so there are figures with their hands up, figures with their hands open, if you will. For me, those are representations of Christ, Christ's symbology, Christ as sacrifice, Christ as a representation of innocence. And I am a pastor's kid, preacher's kid, and always revisiting my childhood belief system that I feel like has expanded just from my own knowledge and research. But I feel like any of us can be representations of Christ, right? Being Christ-like in the ways that we sacrifice our bodies daily. But I would say Breonna, more so in this moment, was a sacrificial lamb. She, like George Floyd, in their unfortunate deaths, brought some light shining on our nation, in which we all, I feel like, became vigilant and stood together in a space for her. I know that was really long, and I hope I answered your question.
No, I think it's
Am
good
I going on and on and on?
It's a great springboard for a lot of the questions that I hope we get to dive deeper into. And I think it's some good background for folks who may be seeing images of the work for the first time. So thank you very much for that. And just, I think probably most people have been familiar at this point, but just in case, so that everyone knows what we're talking about, Breonna Taylor was a woman who was fatally shot by officers of the Louisville Metro Police Department after they forced entry into her home on March 13th of this year. She died as a result, and in the months since her death, her story has definitely been part of national conversations about racial violence, and it's really been an impetus for activism against systemic injustices. But I think one of the things that your work is really trying to do is, while her story may have been sort of co-opted, you're trying to remind us basically of the humanity of her, that this is someone who meant something to people and who needs to be grieved. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about sort of your feelings in terms of how this work both memorializes and or heals, and how you see that fitting into some of what your practice has done so far.
You know, Gloria Ansadua says there is never a resolution, it's just a process of healing, right? So I'm not necessarily looking to, I'm not looking for my work to be a resolve, right? I'm not trying to solve a problem. And I don't see my work as a problem solver. What I am looking for is radical transformation. And what I do understand from Indigenous knowledge systems is that radical transformation can take places when we bring the outside in. And what the outside is a representation of the natural, of nature, of wild animals. A lot of tribes take on the spirit of the animal to transform what's happening with them in their own material worlds, right? And we see that through our movies, right? That's why we celebrate superheroes, because they're able to kind of transform and take on these superpowers, which by and large we would consider superhuman strength in animals, right? When we look at the ways that the cheetah is able to run faster than you've ever seen, when we look at the ways that cats can see at night, we take on these animal spirits through just the language of superheroes and legends and lore and through mythology. And our societies are built on myth and lore, right? As much as we love to read everything within biblical knowledge as absolute truth, is really a compilation of truths, of proverbs, of lore, of myth, in history, right? For those of you who are studies of biblical information. And so I'm compiling all of these things as a language of ritual, as a language of ceremony, as a language of memorial, this go round for Breonna. And my hope is that when people actually have the opportunity to enter the space, is that they will feel the spirit of healing. Not resolution, not that it's over, not that Shanequa has come to save the day via paintbrushes and projections.
If only, right?
If only if only. But what I do know is that artists do a great job of, bringing to the forefront sometimes the things we don't see, sometimes the things we don't observe. And I'm not looking for people to see the world through my eyes. Right? I want people to take away what they will take away, bringing their own experiences, their own histories, and their own ways of being as information and knowledge. And what do you intend to do with that once you see this work? Does that wash away something for you when you enter this space? That propel you to something? Does it propel you? Yeah, like to praise, to spirit, to glory. The images are larger than life for a reason. When we're kind of looking down from a godlike view, I feel like Breonna is looking from a godlike view. She's peering at you as this immense being, right? This kind of immense spirit, viewing and looking at you from the other side. Yeah.
Thank you. I know that in just conversing about this with museum colleagues, supporters, family, friends, a lot of people have asked about the imagery of the animal qualities. And I think for me, like it really helped a phrase click that I guess I had never given much thought to. But when you were telling me how zebras need someone from the herd watching over them to actually be able to sleep, it gave such meaning to the phrase rest in peace to me in a way that I had never really taken time to think about.
Mhm.
So it was powerful, because it was like, okay, this is our effort. It's still, even though she may be gone, trying to do something for her.
Yeah, and I feel like I said, I feel like we as a nation, it may not have been all of us, right? But it was a lot of us out in the streets. I'm no longer a street protester. I had been, but I felt like I could do a better job of resistance and protest through my art, right? So it doesn't take away from what people are doing out in the streets and rallying. I'm just choosing to protest or rally in a different way, and that's through my work. Um, um, but when I saw, just like herds and herds of people just out present and on behalf of Breonna, like it's moving. That's community, and that's us identifying each other in the black and the white. Right? That's us identifying each other and saying we're a community. And when you think about, or you have an understanding of what community means that I don't have to do anything by myself. Community means that nothing is private, all is known. And because our society is so driven toward independence, right? And this individualism, it makes it difficult sometimes to lean on community. And leaning on community for me, especially growing up, meant the borrowing of sugar and ketchup from my neighbors. And a lot of us can't even remember the last time we did that, right? And so for me, this in the middle of a pandemic, people still put on their mask and they rally together and they risk sickness. They risk being, possibly infected with corona, so they could rally for one of their own, right? Right. So it's not about race or genders or where backgrounds or class systems. They rally together for another fellow human being because that's what we are, right? A human race. We're not all of these variations of identities that we've created for ourselves in order to create divisions, in order for others to be in power. And that's a whole nother conversation. But we're all human beings. And so that's the language here. It's not one of trying to degrade Breonna in any way by making her a composite of one of my hybrids, but to build her up and say that we're holding you. We're holding space for you.
I know that you mentioned that you've been working with this concept of the devouts for several years now, since grad school.
Right.
And you mentioned just earlier a number of other animals that, while they don't appear as hybrids in this work, I know have appeared in some of your past works. And I was wondering, do you sort of utilize various species as like a symbolic shorthand, or is it fluid? Like, how are you approaching sort of?
Yeah, initially I had started with deer, right? Deer was like the only thing I was focused on, and that's because my earlier work, the Fair Game Project, was so honed in on the deer being one of the most hunted creatures here in the West, right? That outside, I believe, the duck, right? And so I didn't feel like ducks would translate as well as what I was trying to speak about, what was happening specifically with the African American male body, and just being really didactic with this body of work to say, see, this is what's happening. Look at this, right? They're hunting these men like they're deer. They're fair game. But also leaning toward what deer represent: agility, grace, elegance. They are also a godlike form when you think about their antlers, right? the expanse of their antlers, counting the number of years that they've lived, the fact that their antlers can fall off and regrow, which is a representation of rejuvenation, something that I know that the Black community has continuously had to do, is to rejuvenate themselves and reinvent themselves in many ways in order to survive the systems that of oppression that have laid way to them here, or us, because I'm a part of that community. But yeah, using, when you think about vulture, they clean up the carrion, they clean up the waste, the ways that women have been left to clean up the waste, right? I'm using these different animal kind of totems, kind of like totems on the heads of these women, as unearthing structures of power. What does it mean to be powerful? And is power only represented through gender, right? In the physical, there are different kinds of power that each gender represents, whatever gender that you're self-identifying as. So when you think about men have, right, this brawn, this physical representations of strength. But women bleed every month and they don't die. And they're able to give birth to children and they don't die. Like I, birthed a whole human through my body. Men can't do that. At least not yet, to my knowledge. Men can't do that, right? And so there are different types of strength. And women are able to exude both to me. And so, giving my women the head of the bull, right? Which are normally gendered as male, right? These kind of bull head figures. When you're thinking about the Minotaur being given a life that he did not ask for, right? Because this, right, this Minotaur was placed in a labyrinth, right? Think about a labyrinth representing systems.
Yeah.
right. So there are like 50 million ways, 50 different places that you could go with the representations of these symbolisms, if you will. And then also, again, borrowing from tribes, the way that they take on these masks, and they're able to take on the spirit, they're able to take on Ashe, right? And move in. And for me, my devoutes are continually in this space of Ashe. They're in continual space of this spiritual celebration, and they can move in and out of this space. My devoutes were developed from the prayers of Black women, right? Who feel like they do not have justice here, right? And so who intercedes on your behalf? Who comes to your outcry? Right? Who comes? Because you want somebody to be present. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, Allison, I think we can probably cut off the PowerPoint now, because I was gonna ask something while you're on the topic of sort of the Black community and Black women and them serving as intercessory figures. I remember that in your original proposal, you used a phrase that I had not encountered all that often, and I had to interrogate some, and I think I have a handle on it, but I was hoping I could get you to speak about it. The African ascendant woman, and what that means, what African ascendant means to you.
What you said, what does it mean to me, or like where did it come from, or
a little bit of both, because I know that language is fluid, and
you know what, language is fluid, but language also has meaning, right?
Yes, exactly.
It can have different codes of meaning. So African ascendant, I actually got that terminology from Dr. Cynthia Dillard. She is she speaks a lot about in dark and feminist epistemologies, right? So where I have an understanding just based on how I move through the world as a Black woman, right? And she uses this term, African ascendant, just as a progressive movement when teaching. It's a different exchange, right? Of discourse. When you're saying African descendant, well, we'll just use the word descend. Descend means to fall down. Descend means to step downward. And when we say ascend means to rise. Ascend means to move up. And so I feel like I'm moving up, I'm climbing up to where my ancestors are. I'm not descending from. For me, it's not rocket science to choose to ascend opposed to descend. And for me, I think it's really important that we're mindful of the language that we use. If you're saying that I'm an African descendant when I'm teaching to students about slavery, does that not still put me in that space of, just when we're speaking of these languages, as opposed to saying, well, I'm free, I'm rising up, I'm moving beyond these things. It's all about how we use language and codes of meaning, right? It's no different than when people say urban, people immediately think Black. Right. And so codes of meaning, changing what that means and using counters is really important to me. Yeah.
Thank you. I know some of what I had been reading, which, like I said, I do not claim to be an expert, but that it was also sort of distinguishing how sort of, as you said, people whose ancestors were slaves in America from perhaps like the rest of the diaspora, the global diaspora, or from even like mixed race children, and how basically a very American, geographically specific idea of Blackness. And I didn't know, because I see a lot of sort of world faiths in your art, but when you use that phrase, I felt like you were really locating it in American soil. And I didn't know how that sort of understanding of differing communities and all of that might factor into your work.
Well, I think it's really important to just speak in a transformational dialogue, right?
Okay.
So as opposed to solely focusing on the ways that we hyphenate other people's Americanness, right? So Toni Morrison, favorite literary scholar, she says, in America, all others have to hyphenate. American means white, right? Everybody else has to hyphenate. And so if I have to hyphenate, I like to speak about myself as an African ascendant, right? If I have to hyphenate. Because all others who come here are allowed to kind of keep their Chinese, their Japanese. But we, as a hybrid people, when you speak about us as African American, we're always kind of oscillating in our Americanness, right? In the ways that our rights always seem to be up for grabs, up in question. And so I'll take ascendant sometimes over American in meaning. And I, just that feeling of hybridity, right?
Yeah.
To me, to be American in mind, American in tongue, but my skin represents Africanness, right? My
Thank
features.
you. I think that actually that's really resonates with me in terms of sort of how you talk about hybridity and the ways that you see it manifesting in your work in the world. So I appreciate the elaboration on that. And the other one I was wondering about is you talk about ecofeminism. And I didn't know if that is tied in with a lot of sort of this like animist, sort of spiritualist aspect you've been discussing in terms of how we view animals and their relationships.
Yeah, what I love, and we have so many cool, funky words. So for me, ecofeminism is just a cool, funky word about the relationship between women and nature and humans and nature, and our ability to look back to the ways indigenous knowledge systems move throughout the world, right? And so what you'll find is within indigenous cultures is that they honored nature, right? That is a language that I feel like, over the past century or so that we've tried to kind of get back to, and we're trying to get back to it, right? Because our world is falling apart. We're trying to reach back because obviously some cultures had a better knowing and a better understanding than we did. And that's what I love about, the language of ecofeminism, is that they're like, well, maybe there was something in indigenous cultures that had it right about how we need to treat the earth, right? About how we need to treat the animals. Because obviously we don't have it right, right? We have several endangered species. We have several species that no longer exist. We have a climate that is breaking. You have places that won't have water in, the next 2 decades. Obviously, there was something about indigenous cultures that had it right in the ways that they honored all things. It is the language that all are thou, not just human beings, right? And we actually came last on the totem pole, right? So if you believe in the mythologies of the ways that we were created, right? So the heavens and the earth, the water, the ocean, animals, and then us. And so this language that we are, just this wonderful dominant species, it doesn't make sense. We didn't come first. And so we should honor all that live here. And so I love the language, any group or systems that are speaking about the ways to honor all things and all humans and all beings. I'm for that. Yeah, and ecofeminism really resonated with me for that.
You mentioned that you're daughter of a preacher, and that was an important aspect of your growing up. And I see a lot of your work right now is sort of very ecumenical. And I didn't know if you ever find that you have some tensions between, like, and I'm asking because I have no idea what creed your father preached in, but like between systemic organization, like organized religion, or sort of this broader idea of approaching the world with spirituality.
Yeah. So it's actually my mom.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So it's actually my mother that is the devout. That's actually
Okay.
where the premise and the language of being a devout came from. My mother's a very devout woman. So even growing up, before she received her pastoral license, she might as well have been a pastor, because that's how much we went to church. Went to church Monday, right? And so while she and her now husband are now, or have been preachers, they claim retired, but they don't look retired to me. My belief systems absolutely show up. And it shows up in ways in which I'm grappling with some things, right? And so when I think about what I was told, or what you're told in church, right? Just believe, don't ask questions, just have faith. That makes sense. Why would we serve, a God or an all-knowing being that doesn't want us to ask questions? That doesn't make sense, right? Why are women, why do we have class structures, gender separations in this belief system? This doesn't make sense. And then, like, you're not really aligning with what it actually says in this book. And then, as I mentioned before, a lot of this stuff is lore. A lot of this stuff is teaching lessons. And it was placed here for a reason. It was placed here to keep women in check and to keep them in line. Not because it's true, not because it's real, and so it's important. It was really important for me to kind of do the work of, understanding God the way I know God, not the way I was taught to know God, right? I grew up in a Pentecostal church. My mother's family comes from AME, right? African Methodist Episcopal Church. And so there have been a lot of ways of believing. My mother is also a deliverance minister. And the ways that I was able to kind of look at how deliverance or Friday nights revivals look just like voodoo, right? Voodoo exercises, voodoo rituals, right? The eyes rolling in the back of the head, the yelling, the screaming, the falling out in the spirit, all of that's the same, right? Same thing they do in voodoo. And so looking at the ways that who we were maybe as a spiritual people before we came here still shows up, still shows itself here. And it has been difficult sometimes to create this work because the old way does like say, Shanequa, you can't do that. You can't create deities that ain't actually God, and that's blasphemy. And you're creating, I had a friend tell me I was creating idols. I was participating in idol worship. Even though I'm saying I'm participating in fantasy, I'm participating in my own creative imagination. I don't see my work any different than the Never Ending Story. I don't see my work any different than The Wiz. And all of these are part of my inspirations. I'm looking for ways to kind of create my own hood fantasies and hood mythologies. Um, and it is in no way to degrade anyone's belief system or anyone's thought process, and it's definitely not the language for me of idolatry. But I think it's really important to look at what was before, and to look at why African spiritualism is considered evil. Right. So it's evil in the hands of Black folks, but it's okay in the other, in the hands of somebody else. Right. Right. So like Paula White can call on African angels to come in and intercede on the behalf of the West, but we can't call them. Right. And so I think it's really important to kind of, look at the reasons why things are the way they are. Look at the reasons why it's important to villainize women in the church. It keeps them in check. Looking at the ways that my mother was not allowed to preach in a pulpit because, women can't preach. Women aren't allowed to preach. Why? Like, I think it's really important to ask questions like, why are we villainized? And so for me, I wanted to look at that and then turn those thought processes on their heads.
Yeah. Even if you are, as you just said, creating hood fantasies, I feel a lot of sincerity and solemnity in your work. And the fact that you created an altar with this tiara Black glassware, it just seemed like such a nod to other religious practices that I wanted to ask you about it. So I wasn't trying to put you on the spot about your faith. I'm sorry.
And I am. So we used to go to homecoming at my family's, my mother's church, AME church, right? And so I remember having to go to the altar, pray, put my sins down, be given communion, right?
Mhm.
And drinking the juice, and all of my sins were washed away because I did that practice. All of my sins were washed away because I did that ritual. Well, in what ways can we wash away the sins of injustices that are happening to Black women, or to women in general, or to Black people in general, or to people of color, or to, like, what ways can we wash away our sins through that? And so, it is a practice. It is me creating my own forms of ritual, because I am looking for some cleansing from this. And
this is. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say this has inspired some Q&A questions I see.
Oh.
I'm just gonna throw out a couple. One is, why was the Black tiara glass chosen for the altar? And then someone else asks, what does your mom think of your art?
Oh, I make her participate in my art. You see this thing back here? She actually helped me sew that.
Nice.
It is a community effort.
Yeah.
My mother celebrates my work. And I have actually helped her just through my own research in grappling with my belief system, having enlightened her to different beliefs and different knowledge systems, and her understanding of what she preaches herself, right? And us looking at the book of Esther, us looking at Ruth, us looking at why victory was given to a man as opposed to Deborah in the Bible, why women were villainized throughout the Bible. What was the other question? Why the tiara glass? So Black tiara glass growing up was something my mother brought out for hostess gifts. So like, I'm a 80s baby, right? And so during the 80s, like crystal was popular. So like kind of like late 70s, early 80s. Like, I remember my mom and my godmother always having these crystal house parties, bringing out their good china. If my mother wanted to appear elaborate, she would bring out this Black tiara glass, and it was something that she used to host. It was a part of her hosting. And you know, coming from Southern culture, like hosting is like a thing, right? It's hospitable to have pimento cheese sandwiches and, you know, vinegar cucumbers, like just this language of hosting. And so I wanted to be able to host the space for Breonna. That's where the Black Tiara glass comes from.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it was just personalities, but I know my grandmother definitely had this attitude of she would rather have a hamburger in the dining room than a steak in the kitchen. Like,
Oh my
you put
gosh.
your
My family, by and large, I have members of, especially like my elders, like my great aunt refuses to eat on paper plates. She says that it is a disgrace to the, you know, the ritual of eating. Right. If
Mhm.
she has to have a meal, it needs to be on, you know, a ceramic plate. It needs to be on china. It needs to be, you know, just kind of this
Yeah, yeah.
fine dining assertion. Yes, McDonald's on china or nothing else.
Yeah.
Or nothing else. And you know, my thing is, why are we eating McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
And you worried about it being on a nice plate. I'm asking, why are we eating McDonald's? So, you know, to each their own. But yeah. Right.
So, and I know I've had that are coming up in our Q&A, but also there were a number of questions that were submitted by our respondents. I'm just going to kind of read them through because I feel like they're going for a general thing that I think you've already addressed somewhat, but a lot of people were asking sort of what your thoughts and ideas are about what your work might engender in the viewer. For instance, some of the questions were, what specific practices and behaviors do you hope your installation will cause within individuals? What is the reaction you hope to elicit from the viewer? Is it one of action, remembrance, strength, or prayer? What do you hope people take away from the exhibit after viewing it? In what ways do you hope they are changed? And then we also had, to what extent do you believe the state of a society affects the art that is produced? Do you think that all art is or should be political? These are hard-hitting questions. And I was like, there's no way we can cover them all in an hour, but
we cannot cover all of those in an hour, but a lot of those, yes, I have answered. And so
okay.
I'll lean back again to the quote from Gloria, which is, I'm seeking resolve,
Yeah.
right? And or not resolution, but healing.
Yeah.
So the goal is to heal. And you know, going back to belief systems, you know, they say the ministry of the word is for the preacher first, and then for the members, then for the churchgoers. So the ministry is for me first, right? And then whoever is able to get something from this word that I'm preaching via artwork, so be it. But it was for me to be able to create the work to put it down. It's like I said, I was able to get some cleansing for myself just to get the work done. I was so grateful to have the art and space to get the work done. It was something that had been plaguing me. I'm, you know, similar to everyone else, I had been saturated, you know, through the media about what was happening to Breonna. And I'm like, well, how do I have some place to create work to be able to get this done, to be able to get this off of me? Because this is weighty. To hear this every day and really not see, you know, some type of resolution with this thing. And we still really don't have resolution with this thing, right? Money for sacrifice is not an even exchange. Money for a body is not an even exchange. We desire justice and we desire change. You know, give thanks for the Breonna's law, and everything else that's being done. You know, it was beautiful Vanity Fair cover that was created by Amy Sherrill, and you know, just across the board, what Oprah did in having billboards put up, and you know, having Breonna's image created illustration wise on her magazine cover. Like, it's a lot that has been done on her behalf. But outside of us making beautiful artwork, you know, my hope and my prayer is that change will come. Yeah. What was the other question? Like, while I'm like on my
Well,
soapbox.
no, I threw a lot at you. One of the questions I had that was actually in response to a question submitted was, the question was, to what extent do you believe that the state of a society affects the art? And do you think that all art is or should be political? And I guess my follow-up question before we tackle those is, do you even view this work as political? Because in some ways I see it as about healing. It's about a lot of these very universal shared emotions. And I think it's, as much as anything, it's just that Breonna has been made to be political.
Yeah, I was about to say that. And it becomes, it's always political when a woman does it, right? It ain't ever about healing if a woman creates it, and then especially a Black woman, right? No, I don't see this as political art, right? Is it resistance? Yeah, because we've been bombarded with something alternative to healing. Right. So healing can be a form of resistance. Healing can be a form of protest. So in that way, maybe, yeah, people can see it as political, as my fists up through my art. If you want to see it that way, so be it. But no, I'm not trying to make a political statement. Actually, I'm looking for something outside of the political. And a great way to house or to grapple with the political is to seek the outside, right? So we spoke about earlier, radical transformation. And to take on the animal, to take on the spirit, right? Because it kind of messes with you, right? You're looking at this thing, you're trying to figure out what it is. And that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to figure out why we like this. What's wrong with us? What's going on with us? What's going on with us that we're in the 21st century and this is still like a thing?
Yeah.
Right. Why haven't we moved beyond this? And so I'm hoping, if anything, that we're looking for ways to move beyond. Right, we're looking for ways, while this image of this devoured and Breonna peering out is resting, it's also kind of levitating, and levitation moving, kind of helps you move beyond the thing. You're over it. I'm over it. I'm over it. And so, yeah, those are some of the things that I'm looking to do. No, I'm not trying to see this work as a political statement.
So one of the things that I've just personally been wondering about the more I talk to you is how at peace you seem to be with the process of healing. And let's face it, healing is hard, or we'd be doing it more often. And I just want to know, do you ever feel just exhausted after your creative engagements?
Tony K. Bombara from the Salt Eaters, the beginning of that starts, are you sure you want to be well? Right? Healing is hard work. Healing is hard work. Are you sure you want to be well? And healing is hard work. And, because we've had so much downtime, and not to say my work previously has not been about that, but because we've had so much downtime, I really have had time to kind of look at myself and look at the ways that I move throughout, my life and the people I'm around, and not being around toxicity on purpose. And that's anything, and that's anyone. And just, wanting my work to be more so about the ritual, more so about healing practices, being on my healing journey. I'm taking my art with me. Let's go, we're going this way. Right. And so it is hard work to heal because it's ugly. Right. And I feel like right now, even our nation is going through the ugly, where it's revealing the ugly and it's also pushing against the ugly. Right. And we're dealing with our ways of being, and it's a lot of pushing and pulling going on right now. And I hope, my hope is that it'll be representations of peace beyond this, that we will be beyond, this narrative that someone has created for us about racism. It's just not true. Scientifically, it's just not true. And we only create these hierarchies for power. That's all. It's only for power. And we need to feel like we're in control of something and somebody. And so the better question is, why do you need that? What's that for? And who is that for? What's the purpose behind that? And so for me, yeah, I want to heal. I want to be at peace. I want to be a nice human to be around. I don't want to be a human that's known for, right, having an attitude, being nasty towards someone, treating the earth deplorably, in a deplorable fashion, nor its animals, and nor my fellow human beings. So yeah, healing is hard work because it's hard work to be nice. It's easy to be mean. It really, it really is. But I want to be at peace. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been impressed. I'm like, I wish I had the emotional reserves she did. I know I'm going to ask Allison to come back on here. I know that we have a few questions that have gone unanswered. And I just want to ask also the audience generally, like I said, I did try to incorporate questions that were submitted beforehand, but if you feel that I didn't get to it, then feel free to submit it again in the Q&A box function, and we'll be glad to tackle that. But Allison, what have we missed?
Sure. Well, folks would love to know how you became an artist. Shanequa, what was your journey to becoming an artist?
My journey, painting on my parents' walls.
Uh-oh.
I'm actually the kid who painted on my parents' walls. And my parents would send me to my room for punishment. And one time when they sent me to the room for punishment, I decided to draw on my walls. And my mother said it was just so beautiful and she couldn't be upset and she couldn't be angry with me. And instead of like punishing me, they got me art lessons. They got me private art lessons, which was probably like, when you talk about gratefulness and grace from parenting, like that was huge. And that catapulted me. I was a kid that was like selling Looney Tune note cards in elementary school. I learned very early that I can make money off of my art. I did my friends' posters. You know how you have book report posters? I would do my friends' posters for money.
Yes. You've got to be the first artist I've ever heard say, I did it because I learned I could make money from it.
I did. So I come from a family of entrepreneurs. And so that entrepreneurial spirit was definitely a part of me. I just didn't know how I could use my own gifts in order to do that. Yes, I did it for money. It's a capitalistic society. I'm an artist. There are no starving artists, Diane. It's a myth. It's a myth.
That's amazing. I'm going to send my kids to have art lessons with you so that they can make it in the world. Yes. That gives me hope too for their drawing on the walls, that it might come to something someday.
Don't punish, send them to art school.
Done. With a few more years before we have to make that decision. All right, let's see. Folks at home, someone would like to know if you're considering expanding your ideas of artwork presentation into fully immersive environments. I think maybe this could come out of the way that this work is installed at the Ackland, that soon at some point when the galleries are safe to reopen, we will all get to experience. So could you say more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love for people to walk into an immersive experience with my work, and that's just money. Money, time, and space to be able to do that. But yes, I do see me like growing beyond and it just getting larger and me being able to take up more space. But the art and space felt just really special. Just felt really special. And it's just a great space. It's just a great space to be able to be expansive and be larger than life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a space, I'm sure Lauren has talked with you about this too, a space for conversation. So it will be great to at some point be able to have
and just talk and be present.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kept myself from doing it, but I think I did it maybe once or twice, like took off my shoes and just was able to kind of create. It's a take off your shoes phase is weird. I know you're not supposed to take off your shoes in a museum.
It's not the first time it's happened in there for sure. And not just for dance performances or things like that.
Comfy space. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell us some more about what of your artistic influences are? Other artists or either contemporary people working alongside you or other artists
I,
from
I
history?
like everybody, right? But I'm pulling from a couple of things or a couple of people that influence my work. And I think I mentioned like kind of old school 80s fantasy that I grew up with, which was like The Wiz. Um, I think I mentioned The Never Ending Story. Um, that I mentioned Little Shop of Horrors. Love that.
That's
Like,
my favorite. Cutting
like
back in, Lauren knows.
but specifically Audrey, right? So that fantasy that Audrey created about what she desired, that space for her and Seymour, and how she was, I'm very much into the homemaker's aesthetic and how she was kind of pulling from, this kind of 1940s homemaker, right? But she created this from her own imagination. And so that's specifically in that movie what I love. Toni Morrison, just the way she hones in on, again, the Black experience, and she pulls different histories and compiles these different layers in order to create her characters. Octavia Butler, the same. Chiharu Shioto, I love her large. This is I believe she's Japanese artist, and when she creates these large, expansive, immersive experiences. So she's definitely a go-to. You can't really speak about the silhouette without speaking about Kara Walker. So she's definitely an influence. Bob Thompson, who has a lot of allegory and religion and myth throughout his body of work as well. So it's a lot of people I'm pulling from that are a part of my inspiration. Matisse, the way he brings the outside in through his cut paper paintings, and his influences from a lot. He had so many like fabrics and interiors and pulling from different cultures in order to create his work. I have about 3 or 4 books that just feel like candy to me. Just all the things that he was pulling from for inspiration, definitely fabrics and toile. I could be all day talking about my talking about my influences because there are a lot. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all of those.
Yeah, and I know we're reaching the end of our time, Shanequa, and I want to be respectful of your time and everyone else's time. So I want to thank you again for joining us. But someone did submit a really beautifully simple question that made me smile that I thought might be a good point to end on. And it was just, what gives you hope?
Humans. Humans give me hope. Humans give me hope. I still believe in humanity, as wretched as we can be. Like I still believe in humanity and our ability to love and care and problem solve. And I think that's what we're doing right now. We're problem solving. We're trying to figure out how to move through space and how to move into the future with each other. And so I believe in us, and that gives me hope. Right? Children give me hope. I'm really excited about the next generation. Generation Z is just an amazing. I'm gonna use dope. They're a dope group of generation. Why? Because they're so loving and so accepting of one another, and they rally around one another. And that in and of itself will be a beautiful reflection in the next 2 decades of how our next generation will be. Yeah, what our future will look like. I look to Generation Z.
Thank you. And yes, that feels like a nice, warm, fuzzy, optimistic place to end. We still have a lot of healing to do, but that's a good one. And yes, if there's anything else you'd like to say to close or anything like that.
Well, thank you guys so much. I thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. I cannot believe an hour just flew by that quickly. This is crazy. I feel like I just sat down. I feel like I just came from like fighting traffic, trying to get here and make sure I was present and available. But this was wonderful. Thank you guys so much for talking with me.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, and thanks to all of the people who viewed and participated and asked questions. We really appreciate that as well. So we look forward to welcome you all into the space itself when the time comes. Until then, you can see more installation shots and a bit of a little like video walkthrough of Shanequa's work on our website for the webpage of Holding Space for Nobility.